from here forward, because when people watch asynchronously, they don't like to see me saying hi to not them, I think. So here's a dramatic gesture for my edit. You are tuned in to me, Baratunde. I am a storyteller who weaves together stories of us. Everything I do, almost everything, based in stories of interdependence, how we live together with nature, with each other, and with technology. And today on Super Tuesday, a day of much ballot activity across the United States, I thought I would share an essay I wrote, published 1 week ago at puck.news. You can check it out. There's links to it in the video description, links through my link in bio, and get the across a paywall. But if you are financially strapped or challenged, this is for you. Or if you don't like reading long emails and want me to read them to you, I could offer this as a service and just read long emails to you. But I'll start with my own. So the headline on this is Biden's Black Voter Dilemma. Here we go. The election of Joe Biden didn't come. Oh, and I should just let you know, I'm going to try to connect with you even as I read, thus the lack of precision on the words. I don't want anybody to be like, that's not what the original essay said. It's because I want to be present with you here. All right. The election of Joe Biden did not come easily in 2020. You remember that, right? It was this perfect storm of factors that coalesced at the perfect time to deliver an electoral college margin, and it was still close. It was so close. It came down to less than 45,000 votes in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Now, throughout Trump's presidency, a record number of Americans hit the streets. We're talking protests for everything. Black people protesting police violence, Muslims demonstrating against a religious travel ban, Jews activated by Charlottesville and rising anti-Semitism, women fighting an anti-abortion Supreme Court, and more. Even Republicans concerned by Trump's authoritarian bent. Everybody was in these streets. Scientists marched. There was a march for science. Youth, Gen Z, marched for their lives. There was so much. We got our steps in during the Trump administration. He made us more fit in a couple of ways. All that collective energy translated into votes. But today, that historic coalition is obviously weaker, in large part due to declining support for Biden among the Democratic Party's most loyal constituency. Black people! Now, when I wrote the essay, I did not do that. I could not communicate that. But this is why you should tune into the live stream version. Because when I say Black people, it just brings joy. And we're out of our month. We are in Women's History Month. Happy month. But I can still be like, Black people, and smack myself in the face with a string on my cozy hoodie. From NBC News to the Associated Press, all these surveys are pointing in the same direction. Puck had some access to exclusive polling from Echelon Insights, finding that 18% of Black voters said that the outcome of this year's presidential election didn't matter to them personally. That was 5 points above the national average. For non-college educated voters of color, the number was even higher. There are two factors driving this shift. One is a perception that Biden has failed to deliver on key campaign promises, and his full-throated, though increasingly qualified, backing of Israel in its response to Hamas's horrific October 7th attack. Of course, there is a danger in simplifying a complex story. Not to put too fine a point on it, but Black voters will overwhelmingly vote for Democrats in this upcoming election. There is no great exodus. There is no Blexodus. There is no Blexit. There is no combination of the word black and anything meaning to leave. There is no blaleerd, like black and salir. Look at me flexing on language skills. So that's not the case, right? Nor is it true that every Black American aligned with Palestinian, nor is every Black American aligned with Palestinians over Israelis. But in a yet another tight race, likely to come down again to tens of thousands of votes in a handful of states, the disillusionment of Black Americans could very well decide the election. All right, so we're in it. We're open. We're like into the thing. And I'm just going to take a pause for water. This is going to take much longer for me to read than for you to read it on your own. So, all right. And I see we got some good folks in the room. Now, the White House is certainly aware of this enthusiasm gap. They responded with a flurry of fact sheets, and nothing moves the people like a fact sheet at whitehouse.gov. They've dispatched the president to black churches, and sometimes he gets shouted at when he goes there. They've launched a Black History Month media blitz on black media to spread the word about Biden's accomplishments for black people. Black people! And there is data to support their case. Unemployment, inflation, crime are all down. Small business formation, healthcare access, wages are all up. Median inflation-adjusted wages for Black Americans have grown faster than for any other racial group over the last 4 years. So there is good stuff happening out there. They're not so great about talking about it. So why the obvious disconnect? I wanted to better understand this myself, so I called on plugged-in members of the Black community, besides myself, dug through historical records, I did my own research, hello internet, and reflected on my own life to make sense of the shifting sentiment on the ground. Quote, the biggest word that rings out to me these days is dissonance. That's what Pastor Michael McBride told me when I asked how he saw the 2024 election and Biden's fraying relationship with Black voters. McBride, who goes by Pastor Mike, he's the homie, by the way. I didn't put that in the essay. Again, you can like exclusive little tidbits here. He goes by Pastor Mike. He's a Berkeley area faith leader, was active in Ferguson, and has led successful campaigns against gun violence and mass incarceration. He served on President Obama's Faith-Based Advisory Council and is regularly in touch with the Biden White House and Congressional Black Caucus, though I'm sure they sometimes wish he wasn't so in touch. Now, he is deeply worried that a meaningful number of these voters are going to express their frustration with the economy, the lack of progress on criminal justice reform, and especially Israel's war in Gaza by tuning out the election or even voting for the other guy. Like me, he's aware of the statistics being touted by the administration and the Biden campaign, but that message is notably out of sync with the sentiment in his community. This is me channeling Pastor Mike. Man, here we are in 2024, and life just feels like it's worse. They told me voting for Biden would make things better, but it doesn't feel better, doesn't look better, doesn't seem better, McBride said to me, channeling the frustrations of Black voters he talks to. Quote, there's this looming madman who we just experienced 4 years ago in Donald Trump, and that didn't really feel too good either. So why are we only being offered these two choices when it doesn't feel like it's getting better? End quote. So, and I just want to acknowledge, because I'm not going to wait till the end to acknowledge you. This made me laugh from my face. Yes, but Cheeto Satan has done more for Black people by being indicted. Tanya, I've missed you. Welcome back. Welcome to the stream, to the flow. All right, so here we're diving into the first big section as I kind of walk through these different beats of where this disconnect comes from. For all the progress the United States has made since the darkest days of the pandemic, there's a growing perception in the Black community that the country is backsliding. Quote, there's a narrative that the economy is great, said McBride, but people aren't stupid, he cautions, pointing to mass death amongst the non-white population during COVID and the financial insecurity of the gig economy. And I really appreciate this line he said here. You can't just say things and be mad that people don't believe it. And I think that's part of the attitude that we have seen a little too much of. A sense of scaring folks into voting, of shaming folks into voting, of trying to shake folks. And on occasion, people need to be shaken. But there is too much of that and not enough of the acknowledgement. So I'll continue with the reading part. But economic frustrations are only part of the equation. In the Black community, voters are hyper aware of the cultural and political backlash surrounding racial justice following the revolutionary summer of 2020. Y'all remember that? Yeah, that was a doozy. In the years since, the Supreme Court has killed affirmative action. Red states are attempting, often successfully, to reverse years of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And after record-setting demonstrations and demands for changes in policing and public safety, public opinion has moved back toward that 1990s-style tough-on-crime set of policies. As a result, progressive prosecutors have been ousted. Biden emphasizes funding the police, and news stories about rising retail theft are fueling the perception of a nation out of control. Now, in the past, moves in this direction, they've led to increases in the types of criminal legal action that prompted moves for reform in the first place, because they lead to the state trying to control Black folk for this perception of things being out of control. This disproportionately falls on the Black community through surveillance, policing, arrests, and sentencing. Here's another quote from a different person. I talked to more than one person. Notwithstanding the president's accomplishments, there are key items on, I'll call it, the Black and brown agenda that did not get done. That's what Mark Morial, the former mayor of New Orleans and current president and CEO of the National Urban League, told me. The civil rights organization plans to release, live edit, today released the State of Black America report, which includes a report card on Biden's promises to the Black community. Now, when I wrote this, I hadn't yet seen the report, but I was up early this morning and I did see the report. So you should check it out. NUL.org, nationalurbanleague.org, stateofblackamerica.org, I believe is the URL. But if you just go to the National Urban League website, that's NUL.org, it'll be front and center. And you can read it for yourself. It is largely a positive report card. And it is full of reminders, like one of the first things Biden did when he got into office. The literal first thing Biden did when he got into office, other than take a deep breath and sage the place, was an executive order calling for the inclusion of essentially a racial equity lens in a lot of federal regulation implementation through the agencies. Every agency was supposed to take that into account. That's a meaningful move. And the National Urban League rightfully gives Biden credit for that, amongst a number of other things that I've already mentioned in this essay / live stream / me reading a very long website at you. But I'll return to the reading. It seems safe to say that grades will be handed out on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which aimed to establish a comprehensive framework to prevent and remedy racial profiling by law enforcement, and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which was meant to modernize the 1965 seminal legislation by strengthening legal protections against discriminatory voting practices. Both bills passed in the House, but failed in the Senate. And the report card calls that out. It names names: Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, who refused to make an exception to the filibuster for Voting Rights Act. Would have been a really beautiful, wonderful thing, something that Biden refused to criticize them for because he wants to play nice sometimes. But there is more to not just the passage of that. And I'll just keep going for now. American presidents aren't kings or queens, at least not yet. And they aren't solely responsible for the failure or success of their agendas. But for many younger voters in particular, the politics of the current moment are a crushing reality after the pandemic, a crushing reality check after the pandemic era, when government flirted with novel, even radical forms of economic relief. Deep frustration with this course reversal, the undoing of important racial justice work, and a deepening political stasis is clearly a detrimental factor in Biden's support among Black voters, which has dropped from 91% on Election Day, the last one, to 75%, according to a February NBC News poll. All right, I'm going to take a water break. This is like a marathon. It's like a reading marathon. I got to stay hydrated. And let's see. Oh, we got a lot of comments. M. Jeter says, "Hi, leftists." I'll take it. What up? You got a nice face, bro. I'm gonna put your nice face up on the screen. Thank you for joining. And accomplishments, save this place, this guy's delusional grades. Yeah, so I literally am reading a script. And just to catch you up, let me do a couple of things. Let me show you so you kind of get a little bit more context. I'm reading this. There's an article I wrote, came out a week ago. It's behind a paywall. And this is me liberating the article from the paywall because a lot of people don't want to pay for stuff or can't. And it's a very long piece. So if you come in at one moment, it's unhelpful to judge it by the one sentence you just heard. But overall, it's a critique of Biden and his relationship with the Black community, some ideas of what he could do about it, but literally try to name and research what's going on. Because I talk to people who are way more in touch with folks on the streets than certainly the average political pundit, certainly than me at this point in my life. So appreciate you showing up, bro. And yes, I will stay hydrated. M. Jeter in the house. Let's go back. So what I've just wrapped up is like this first block. And there's 4 pieces to this overall argument. The first being basically a failure to perform, a failure to deliver on some core needs in the Black community around economics, around justice, and around voting rights. The Biden people will say it was the Republicans, it was the courts, they stopped us. And that is true in so many ways. And there has not been, according to a lot of the folks I talk to, I would say everyone I talk to for this piece and some of what I've been feeling myself, a real honest sit in the hot seat, as Pastor Mike would say, with folks in the Black community about some of this failure. And on the criminal justice point, I'll just ad lib a bit on that. What I said maybe before you showed up, Mr. Jeter, is, this rollback on the criminal justice stuff. A lot of it is based on feeling, not facts. It is a kind of design, but not built on data to roll back the clock. And crime has spiked in some areas, but overall, it's come way down. And in a lot of places, it's stayed way down. This narrative about smash and grabs and retail theft and organized crime has been debunked. But the policies enacted in response to it are still in place. And when we go back to that kind of behavior, the people who pay for it are mostly poor Black people. And so case by case, city by city, things are different. And some cities have gone through some hellishness. And so I'm not here to gaslight on that. But I am here to say that the reason that initial coalition coalesced, any one group could take credit for it. But I started talking about the unprecedented amount of protests, people literally in the street, from scientists to Black folk and everybody in between. And a lot of that energy got converted because COVID. And I spoke with a political person who's really well-versed. I didn't ask for her permission to quote her, so I won't. But I'll just tell you that she knows more than me about voter activation and campaigning. And part of what happened in 2020 was the old playbook was out. And people were improvising. And people were so angry and so motivated. And like, all right, let's go. Let's get this done. And that energy is not here anymore. But so much of what fueled it was this criminal legal system stuff, this reform, this movement to adjust how we practice public safety. And to see that, not just in the failure of a bill to be passed, but in the failure of a defense of the factual narrative. The Biden White House has really caved on that. I think that's hurt a lot of people, and they feel really abandoned by that. All right, I spent a little bit more time on that than I thought. Now we're going to get to the easy part. Palestine. Actually, before I jump, let me check out some of these comments. So, Martha, what's up? Good to see you again. Martha asks, is it reasonable to break down on Biden when he has a MAGA wall breaking Congress and a Supreme Court out of control? Not fully, but everything is partial. And as I was just explaining, not all of the failure to deliver is about legislative failure and missing of votes or the inability to get the filibuster removed on things like voting rights. I think it's a failure to stand up for the story and the values that so many people sacrificed a lot for. And I share some of this. I'm also just trying to explain it too. And again, this is a 91% to 75% drop in the Black community. It's not 91 to 9, but that's meaningful in this game of margins. And the way Pastor Mike put it, who is way more in touch on a daily basis, is like folks just they're not feeling it. And when you add like information vacuum, or the inability to access some of what's actually gone on, bad storytelling from the administration on tooting their own horn when they could, yes, obstruction by Republicans, which they are not interested in health and wealth for Black folk either. This is not about, oh, and therefore Trump. We'll get to that. That's the part 4 of my 4-part argument. We're still in part 1. All that stuff adds up. And I think that failure to stand up for that story and against some of the flagrant misrepresentations about why you're blaming activists for crime waves that aren't real, that's a problem. And it's the same old game. And there are some folks who are very comfortable with that language and with that role, and uncomfortable with some of what we were starting to talk about in 2020. So that's some of what has happened with some of the disillusionment. I would also be, I think it'd be irresponsible for me not to acknowledge that the communications and messaging ecosystem is super trash and fragmented. And there's a lot of incentive for people to dial up those feelings and poke at them and pour salt in those wounds. And they may not even live in this country. There's another piece I'm going to work on to explain some of the disinformation ops that are running. Even if they have a basis in real feelings and even real facts, they are distorting the overall landscape. But that's not what I've done in this piece, because there was enough to bite off already for that. So thank you, Martha. And let me turn that down. And okay. Yeah. What up, Tracy from California? Hi. M's in the house. Okay. So, and eventually I'll get like a super better prompt, and I'll just have the script like right in front of me, so I don't have to do this distracted thing. But I don't have that hardware yet because it's on back order. Just fancy software. The Palestine issue, part 2. Another contributing factor, of course, is the president's ongoing support for Israel in its war against Hamas, despite his recent shift to a more critical tone. And I wrote this before VP Harris and Edmund Pettus Bridge calling for an immediate ceasefire. Long pause, wait for applause for 6 weeks. But I'll go back to what I wrote and we can get interactive on what's happened more recently. The polling on this issue has been unambiguous. Black voters don't approve of Biden's Gaza rhetoric and policy. According to a recent Time Siena poll, 34% of Black voters said they sympathize more with Palestinians than Israelis in the conflict. So that's 34%, while 28% said the opposite. White, Hispanic, and other cohorts were all more likely to sympathize with Israelis on balance. The data was even more pronounced among younger voters. Rather than preparing to get out the vote, McBride told me, we're still having to answer questions about, is President Biden and the United States complicit in a genocide? Brief editorial moment. That is very distracting. That is very distracting to get out the vote efforts when people are seeing this stuff play out. And you don't have to agree with the use of the word genocide. I'm not here to get into that debate about the specific meaning, but horror, catastrophe, humanitarian disaster, and it's unnatural, right? It's human made. We know when it started and why it persists. That is really hard for a lot of people to just ignore and be like, yay, let's get out the vote. So that's some of what Pastor Mike was sharing with me, some of what I've certainly felt myself. Now, I'm going to continue with the script. No matter your politics, it's impossible not to be appalled at the relentless killing, displacement, starvation, and destruction of infrastructure inflicted on millions of Palestinians in Gaza over the past several months. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's punishing ground operation has led to a chorus of concern from many walks of public life, including Black religious leaders, more than 1,000 of whom have publicly issued a demand for a bilateral ceasefire, the return of hostages, an increase in humanitarian aid, and the end of Israel's occupation of the West Bank. Pastor Mike was one of those people who helped organize that. You may have seen big full-page ads and coverage of it. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk with him. So here's a quote from Pastor Mike. This whole thing has just turned into quite a moral conundrum for a lot of us who operate in the sphere of ethics, McBride told me. Our concerns are largely either trivialized or ignored as naive, and there seems to be no political will to stop it. So that is a challenge. In this fraught moment, back to the article, after the atrocities on October 7th, I've been asked by several Jewish friends why Black people feel such a strong sense of solidarity with Palestinians. Several expressed concern and hurt after showing up, both historically and in recent years, in support for Black Americans. In trying to understand this, I considered my own journey. I grew up in the 1980s in D.C., the shadow of both the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. Now, both of these movements sought liberation for Black people from America's racist systems, but they differed in emphasis and tactics. This is kind of a sidebar, but an honest plug. This tension between kind of civil rights and Black Power is explored beautifully in the current Nat Geo series Genius, MLK-X, which chronicles the lives of both Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X in parallel. Ain't nobody paid me to say that or put that in this piece, but it is a very helpful dramatization of some of these simultaneous strands in Black history and thus American history, personified by these two men, as well as Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz, who both get a lot of attention, which we're not used to seeing portrayed in a series about the heroes of the civil rights movement. It's these men out front and their wives doing something in the back, aka holding the whole thing together and advising them, putting literal words in their mouth in many instances. So I'm going to continue on this. The connection between Black and Jewish Americans, especially around the civil rights movement, is legendary. Jewish Americans were among the founding members of the nation's oldest and most well-known civil rights organization, the NAACP, and they funded and co-led many of its key civil rights legislative battles, including for desegregation. The Ku Klux Klan murdered Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, those were two Jewish men, and James Chaney, who was a Black man, because of their work to help register Black voters during the Freedom Summer of 1964. Black Americans also showed up for our Jewish allies, having bravely fought in World War II, in part to bring an end to the Nazi regime, with leaders ranging from W.E. Boys to Marcus Garvey to Bayard Rustin supporting the establishment of Israel, having been inspired by its goals of self-determination. There was a fascinating history here that I haven't been hearing in the rhetoric and the side choosing and the fracturing of these coalitions in this moment. And so I literally read scholarly papers to try to understand many of the things I wasn't fully taught or only had a glancing familiarity with. So I'm curious if you knew all these things, throw a little comment in. Meanwhile, I will keep going and dive into some of the comments Actually, you know what? Let me deal with this one right here, right now. Marcus Mason. It's not on this topic, but it's in the essay. So let me just see. Marcus, hope you don't mind me putting your name and your words on the screen. Thank you so much. When progressive prosecutors stop prosecuting long lists of crimes, the data reflects the change in prosecution, not the facts about crime. The crime wave is real. Okay. So yes, in part, and. And I've seen enough articles, and I don't have them all at my disposal at this second. So I'm not going to be able to do like a total engagement on this point. There have been a rise in crime in all kinds of places, whether there was progressive prosecutors in place or not, owing to the extraordinary circumstances of COVID. And that is established fact. I would just ask you to trust me and then verify for yourself. And you know, if I find that I'm saying something wrong, I'll try to at least update in the comments or maybe a companion video like, yo, I messed that part up. Some cities were worse than others. Some were very blue. There's also been a ton of murders and crime waves in red areas and red cities too. So it's not a simple case. I think what people are objecting to is a simple case like, oh, you put progressive prosecutors in and crime went through the roof because of that, and you didn't do anything about it. Now, what I will also acknowledge, and I remember watching Gavin Newsom in his debate with Ron DeSantis, and it felt like he wasn't trying to engage in the way you're also calling out here, Marcus, that, yeah, there's also been some increase. Like things are way more visible. There have been increases in crime. They're statistically verifiable, and it's not universal, and it's not simply in Democratic-led cities and blue cities, but there has been a bit of a wave. It's just a very uneven wave. And it's like a very unfair, super simplistic assessment to pin it all on Black Lives Matter or the language of some activists. And I've also know people who are some of those progressive prosecutors who are not too excited about defund the police as a high-level narrative, right? The more specific message was like reallocate resources toward frontline workers who are more appropriate to the task. It just didn't roll off the tongue in the same way. So I want to partially engage on this point and then keep it moving because we're not even halfway through. And I do need to deliver my ballots today. But thank you. Thank you for showing up and paying enough attention to throw a thoughtful, comment. And it seems like you still disagree with me, and that is okay. Okay. So back to the Palestine topic and issue. I'm going to keep reading from there. So I've just talked about history of some Black-Jewish alignment. There's also a parallel history of Black solidarity with Palestinians, largely born in the 1960s as Black power activists reframed our domestic struggle as part of a global movement for liberation. These leaders encouraged solidarity with third world citizens freeing themselves from European colonial powers. A pioneer in building this bridge was Malcolm X. Malcolm X visited Gaza in 1964, visited the refugee camp of Khan Yunis, which is a phrase that many people are newly familiar with because of what's playing out there now. And that visit left an indelible mark on him. In the essay, I linked to this freely accessible scholarly report. I'll try to add it as a comment. Oh, you know what? I think do not try, do. And let me just paste it here for those who are really interested in diving deep. It's a scholarly article, but it's very easy to read. It's very easy to read. So Malcolm X kind of opened a door. Others followed. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Black Panther Party, poet June Jordan, scholar and activist Angela Davis, all embraced the Palestinian cause. And this is a line sometimes I write these pieces, I regret sentences that I think of later that I should have put in. And here's one you'll get that's not in the written piece. The first candidate for president to call for a peace process, an acknowledgement of displaced Palestinians in that process, was Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm, first woman run for president, first Black person run for president. And then where I pick up the story, Jesse Jackson was the second. Jesse Jackson used his presidential campaigns to link the plight of Palestinians to Black South Africans under apartheid. There's also a whole history with South Africa and its relationship with the Palestinian Liberation Organization versus the Israeli government's relationship with the apartheid government of South Africa for defense and nuclear stuff. And it's a whole can of worms. And again, I did not have time and won't now totally unpack that. Just want to acknowledge it as we move on. James Baldwin, in a prescient 1979 piece for The Nation, warned, quote, "There is absolutely no hope of establishing peace in what Europe so arrogantly calls the Middle East without dealing with the Palestinians." Baldwin also wrote a whole nother essay that I thought about calling into this piece about Black-Jewish relations in this country and how European Jews who arrived here also had the opportunity to become white, which Black people will never have that opportunity, which complicates the sense of belonging, access to privilege, and the solidarity gets more complex because of that. I'll put it that way. Continuing with the script, there are 21st century parallels as well between the Palestinian cause and the Black Lives Matter movement, with their mutual focus on state violence and systemic racism. Palestinians echoed cries of "I can't breathe" and used George Floyd's image while protesting Israeli occupation in the West Bank. Palestinian activists advised BLM activists on how to survive police assaults and tear gas. After several months of heartbreaking, gut-wrenching images of war, made possible in part by American weapons and funding, and not even just in part, I would say like insignificant part. I don't know the numbers, but I know without us, this would not be possible. So made possible by American weapons and funding, it should come as no surprise that Black Americans are feeling a deep sense of solidarity with Palestinians. This need not, and of course, for most does not, come at the expense of solidarity with Jewish people. As with the civil rights movement, many Jewish Americans were allies of BLM, marched for George Floyd. I recall a dramatic letter signed by over 600 Jewish organizations forcefully declaring Black Lives Matter and making explicit the interconnected nature of justice for all. But the devil is in the details, and sometimes the words. Some of the solidarity expressed for Palestinians also includes sympathy for the idea of eliminating the Jewish state. Meanwhile, many Black Americans take offense at being labeled anti-Semitic for demanding action to stop a humanitarian catastrophe inflicted on Palestinians. Underpinning the sense of hurt or betrayal for both groups is the fact that the historical bond between Black Americans and both Jewish and Palestinian communities runs deep. That duality makes this moment extra fragile and confusing. So I wanted to have a beat for that in this piece because so much of the criticism all around acts like this just started on October 7th. And that Black people just decided, and Black kids decided because it's cool and it's trendy to scream free Palestine. And there is a lineage to this stuff that runs through communities. I also felt like the history of Black folk and Jewish folk in America was not really surfacing. It was very simplistic. We marched with King, therefore. We marched for George Floyd, therefore. But also some of the Black folk I know weren't aware of any of this stuff. And that runs deep too. So I'm trying to surface a couple different things here and appreciate you sticking with me through it. Let's see. Oh, that's very kind. Yeah, thank you for that. Marcus says, well, that's not the kind thing. Gigi by the sea. Appreciate you, Gigi. Appreciate this discussion. Hope for more events in the months ahead. Please all prioritize self-care right now and know better times are already on the way. I appreciate that message, and I hope you're right. And I would say, yes, prioritize self-care. There is a lot of stress and strain associated with living in this moment right now. We don't always recognize how that lands, in us. So take Gigi's advice to the extent that you can. Marcus is back again. Too many Black people see the Jews as a white people versus a non-white people. That's part of the complexity, man. It's not that simple. I think as Baldwin pointed out, and as has happened with many immigrants from Europe, there is this pathway to whiteness that is available to some who come to this land and not to others. And I was, recently in a deep communal moment with a Jewish friend who was kind of recognizing for themselves that they've mostly been able to be white and kind of Jewish in the background. And then this event has really foreground their Jewish identity because of ancestral trauma of being kind of hunted around the world for 2,000 years and just expecting the other shoe to drop at any moment when a government decides you are the problem and you got to go. And there's been a lot of slippery slide stuff happening in this moment at the fringe, but can be very loud and very disconcerting on the backs of Jews will not replace us tiki torch fellas. That goes beyond Israel criticism and into just flagrant, flippant Jews this, Jews that, Jews the other thing. There's a really long piece that explores this in The Atlantic by Dara Horn, which I'd have to break the paywall to read that one to you. And it's even longer than mine. So I don't know if any of us have the full time for that. But appreciate all the comments on this. And I'm going to try to, perfect point. Let me acknowledge this. This is why it's kind of cool to do this with you. Rima, what's up? Long time no see. Not all Jews come from Europe. That is very true. And I didn't mean to imply that. I was talking specifically about the white race dynamic in the US and that possibility of accessing American whiteness for European Jewish immigrants and their descendants. Certainly, there are Jews all over the world. There's tons of Jews in Africa, a lot of Jews in the Mediterranean and Middle East area that are not European. Long history of that. Yeah, I've been reading too many books. Okay. Thanks, y'all. So where was I? Oh, that duality, our relationship with both these peoples makes this moment extra fragile and confusing. Things just real tender right now. In under-resourced Black communities, this goes beyond a moral issue. It's also a matter of resource allocation. As McBride shared with me, you've got some of the least politically conscious people around U.S. imperialism and global affairs asking, why are we sending this money to Ukraine, to Israel, And I can't get none of that to help relieve my own challenges here. This moment is the water on the seed that Tupac planted in the hip hop generation when he said they got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Whoo. Woo. Yeah, that's real. And even the surge of resources to deal with the migrant crisis at the U.S. southern border causes many in the Black community to ask, why aren't we surging resources to the south side of Chicago or South Philadelphia or East Oakland? Part of that answer is we never have. Not really, regardless of any international activities we have funded. And certainly the modern Republican Party has no intention of reallocating the money they say they want to save in Ukraine toward poor Black communities here at home. Those programs are on the chopping block too. Still, Biden and the Democrats can do more to engage with the frustration and disappointment that McBride references. Quote, you're going to have to sit in the hot seat. You're going to have to sit with some Black folk in the hot seat. And I don't think they feel like they should have to do that, he told me. Instead, they try to sell you some line about how this is better than that, but this ain't good enough. And that kind of brings the finest point that I really was hoping to communicate, and I'm hoping it's coming across now. It's not a simple matter. This goes back to a comment you made earlier, Martha. It's not a simple matter of just like naively blaming Biden for things that Republicans wouldn't let him do. It is skipping over some of that accountability and not sitting in the hot seat. I'll give you a little exclusive. That's something that I really wanted to be able to fit into the piece, but it was running so long all the while. Pastor Mike told me, he had a suggestion for the White House that as Biden's doing all these travels from day one, not now, like from day one, just me. He knew he had a Black male problem. He had a problem in like some softness, right? Some softness, especially among Black men who have some tendency toward Trump for some reasons we'll get into later. And he's like, you should just do a tour off the record, no press, just talk to dudes, listen, mostly listen, and show up in that way. And you know how transformative that would be, how that would travel through the hood, the President of the United States making time for us. Are you kidding me? A lot of people just want to be heard. And certainly after being heard, they want action taken. But when action can't be taken because of a Joe Manchin or a Kyrsten Sinema or Republican apparatus in the Senate or the courts, there's still an opportunity to be present with folks and literally physically meet them where they are. And they have not availed themselves of that opportunity. That's some of the missed opportunity. Okay, hydration break. Thank you. You are tuning in to me drinking water. And I haven't done an announcement of what I'm doing here. And I realize next time I do this, I need to create a little title I can throw up for folks who just walk in the room and don't know what's happening. Hopefully the video title kind of gives it away. But I am reading an essay that I wrote for Puck. You can find it at puck.news. I will drop that link in the chat as well in case you want to spend money anyway or see how the story ends and you don't have time to stick around. This is the link I just dropped into the chat for that. If you're watching over here on Instagram, bless your heart. Bless you and your heart. I see you showing up. And hopefully you know that I am over here at youtube.com/Baratunde. And that is something that you should get yourself on over to and get the more full experience. youtube.com/ that's where you can get the widescreen experience. You could turn your phone sideways and see more of the world in the way that our eyes are oriented. That would be dope if we all did that. All right, let me just pin that there. All right, cool. And people who get the side view, they're enjoying it. I'm enjoying myself too. It is taking some energy. All right, let me check in on some of these here comments. Tanya, what happened to Whiskey Fridays? I'm cooking up something for you. So hold your horses. There is better days are coming, and we will gather again in celebration of spirit of all kinds. Oh yeah, I'm a fancy Negro. I got bamboo blotters. I don't want to be all shiny up on you. So we're halfway through. And in terms of text, we are past halfway. We're halfway through the argument. We dealt with some of the failure to deliver. We've dealt with, as if we ever could, Palestine, not fully. And I'm going to get into the third piece, which is about democracy. And I put kind of air quotes on it for a reason. The Plot Against America, Part 3. In a time of collapsing faith in every kind of institution, it feels short-sighted to use Save Democracy as a political rallying cry. And I just want to expand on it because a lot of the way people are showing up right now is like, we got to save democracy. Cool. What does that mean? For a lot of folks, it means we got to save these institutions. Okay, what institution are you talking about? We're talking about Congress? Is that the institution? Everybody hates Congress. We're united in that. We're talking about the courts? Nobody feeling that either. We're talking about rule of law in a nation that's broken every treaty with every indigenous group ever, right? Like, we got to be a bit more honest about some of the failures of the institutions that we're trying to save before we skip to the saving. And not just save, but redefine, renew, right? Reimagine, upgrade, renovate, improve. A lot of re's, just re-everything, re-up. So I'm going to continue with the read, but I just felt like expanding on that one sentence. I've written before about the limitations of using this tactic to appeal to voters, but it's a centerpiece of Biden's reelection campaign. He talks commonly, constantly, about Trump as a threat to democracy. He says things like, democracy is on the ballot. It's like, no, you are. You're on the ballot and a bunch of other human beings. But, this idea of democracy is vague and disconnected from most people's lives. And for Black Americans, who in many cases are not experiencing the benefits of a statistically well-performing economy, who believe that Biden has failed to live up to his promises and who every day witness the government's backing of a humanitarian disaster, the democracy card just ain't that persuasive. As McBride told me, I've had formerly incarcerated people on my team who still don't have their full rights restored. And they're like, I'm not trying to defend democracy. I'm not even part of democracy. Unless democracy gets translated into tangible, positive outcomes in people's lives, not just in data, it won't resonate and will contribute to the dissonance McBride has noted. Ultimately, he told me, this is like the saddest thing he said to me. He said a couple of sad things. I think people aren't holding the whole of this country more than they're trying to hold together the fragments of their own lives and neighborhoods and people they know and love. So, yeah, I'm still just like feeling that, and there's something else the way Pastor Mike articulated to me is worth adding to the mix here. When you layer these things in and this is, again, I'm not trying to speak for all Black people. This is a portion of the community that is just not reaping the rewards of this on paper booming economy. And folks who haven't fully recovered from the smack in the face that was COVID and who are subject to the criminal legal system in extraordinary ways and who try to engage in democracy and are turned away or are not invited in or literally blocked, depending on how we're defining that word. And so you're skipping to the end when you just say, save democracy. Like, okay, saving what? What's democracy? For who? How? What does this look like for me? And I'm not saying Biden's not done any of this, but it's not enough. It's just not enough. And I'm someone who's like in the pro-democracy movement. I have a podcast and show called How to Citizen. I love me some democracy. I really do. And I think we are imagining it way too small. And we're not dealing with the walls between it as a vague concept and people's actual lives. I've also seen polling for the past several years now, since Trump was in the White House. The American people writ large, it's not just a Black people thing. Democracy doesn't move us. It's just the word. It's something we think we hold dear. But when you test it, it doesn't motivate most people. Spam risk is calling. Does anybody ever answer when spam risk calls? Also, I should put this joint and do. Who's like, I'm down for some spam right now. That's what I'd love. So not me. But on this democracy point, yeah, I want to be as clear as I can. I love democracy. I love voting even. And democracy is more than voting, and it's more than formal institutions. It's a whole way we practice living together. It's a whole way we navigate power and disagreements and work across difference. It's the promise of this place unrealized. And not just this place, a whole bunch of places around the world. But we have a particular mix going on here because of our multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-everything going on from very early days. And we have not dug deep enough on that. And I see this superficial, like people should stand up for democracy. Everyone should feel compelled to save it. People aren't there. Not everybody, reads The Atlantic. And if you do, you're very depressed because there's a mostly depressing publication. And so what does democracy actually mean? How are its fruits born in the daily meals that people consume and make for themselves in their lives? And if we don't have a good answer to that, a good practice for that, then we're leaving a lot of people out of the conversation. And in this case, I'm focused on Black people, but it is not exclusive to Black people. It's all kind of people. It's poor people. It's people who are just exhausted. Even people with means who are just tired of the whole thing. Like, okay, I hear the word democracy. I don't feel that showing up every day. And some of that's just the story we tell about what it is. So if that resonates with you, check out howtocitizen.com. Check out our back catalog of episodes. We got 57 episodes that explore this concept much more thoroughly. And that's some of what I am implying in these comments right now. I'm just dropping a link in the chat right now. Boom, howtocitizen.com. So let's see here. Let's see. Oh, we got a little discussion. Let's see. Tools for thought rock. This is why turning citizen into a verb is so powerful. Yes, you did the reading. Yes. I'm so enthusiastic. My whole setup is shaking. Thank you. Normalize the everyday experience, practices, and consequences of democratic action. Small d. Small d. Thank you for that. Martha gets it. Of course, the business of citizening is to create democracy. You can't be a beatnik and drop out. C'est la guerre. That's why we are here. Yes, yes. And Martha, you don't vote, you won't eat. Well, okay. Within the bounds, kids don't vote, and y'all feed these kids every day. So I don't know, maybe democracy does not require, certainly the ballot is not the gateway to the belly in every instance. And Tanya throw up a question here I don't think I fully understand, but since most people of the global majority, non-unmelanated. Okay, wow. That's like I had to do a double backflip. It's like a triple, that's gymnastics. Good job. Since most people of the global majority are underrepresented above local politics, do you think one person, one vote will radically change American politics? Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're referring to our electoral college system, that perverse innovation of the sustainment of Southern slaveholding state power in this country. Have I tipped my hand on what I feel about that? Yeah, I do think that would make a big difference. There are some also structural reforms, big structural reforms, Elizabeth Warren, that we also need. It's always a yes and with me, but in getting back to where we're at in this piece, and thank you for doing. We got the view count is climbing. This is good. We're keeping people's attention. You're telling your friends. This is great. And hello, Instagram. Come on over. The water's nice in the widescreen world. It's like HD. So I'm going to go back to reading, go back to the script, and kind of round out this section, I think. To be clear, democracy is under threat in a literal sense when Trump promises to act like a dictator on Inauguration Day. Freedom of assembly and the ability to protest government decisions will come under threat if he manages to return to the White House. So that's real. That's real. And there's a whole nother body of work to like make that real. And I'm not one to lean into fear, as a tactic, but there are some things that this dude has promised that we would be fools to ignore. And we all, like you have a hurricane plan, you got an earthquake plan. Some people have an avalanche plan or a flood plan, tornado plan, fire. You get it. We need a Trump plan, right? What are we all doing if this dude gets back in there? Because we would be very naive and foolish to assume it can't happen, because it has happened. It did happen. And all the polling suggests it will happen. So certainly very, very possible, even plausible possibility here that we got to really contend with. At the same time, back to my prior written words, we can't just scream democracy and assume people will rally around it, especially when our existing democratic systems aren't responsive to the will of the people. And that failure to deliver isn't solely attributable to Trump or Republicans. Leaders from the Democratic Party have overseen rises in unaffordable housing and wealth inequality, among other things, in some cases crime. I see you. And ironically, this really, this gets me. It gets my wife upset too. Ironically, the party positioning itself as the standard bearer of democracy has chosen a presidential candidate through a decidedly non-democratic process. This is the thing that we're not saying out loud. This is the thing that really gets under some people's skin. We know where the Republican Party stands. They stand with Trump. It's the Trump party. And there are still Republicans who are not a part of that, but the great body of that politic is under his spell. And they're not pretending. They just put his daughter-in-law or something to run the whole party. Come on, man. This is some real basic authoritarian moves. So that's happening. That's happening. And meanwhile, the party that carries the name, Democratic Party, democracy, this thing we're trying to save, did not have a robust democratic process to arrive at the conclusion that Joe Biden would be the candidate on the ballot this time around. And that's a swing and a miss. Now here we are on Super Tuesday as we do this live, this version. If you're watching later, hello from the past. I have time traveled to your present moment to shake some words into your consciousness. But yeah, man, we just, and the people didn't choose that. It wasn't like great throngs of American people like, yeah, let's do it again. The party apparatus did that. The people around him who want to stay in power. And credit to the dude, he's done a job I don't want to do it. I get his frustration. Inflation Reduction Act. Look what I did there. Look, biggest climate thing ever. He's got some good things he can point at. And we all see what's happening. We all see it, and it doesn't feel good. So that is a deep irony at the heart of this save democracy argument that they'll never say, but I'll say. It needs to be said. I'm going back to the text. At a minimum, we have to acknowledge people's skepticism and doubt and rebuild trust from there. There's been too much dismissal. These kids don't know what they're talking about. These black people are ungrateful. Just get in line. Shaming is a very unhelpful tactic of persuasion. When is the last time it worked on you? Maybe we try something different. Part 4. The trumpeting. What do you have to lose? This segment brought to you by water. All right, we're going to land this plane. WS If Trump gets back in, Putin will be the actual president. Trump is Putin's puppet. I mean, he does have a way of coincidentally saying things that Vladimir Putin says and making moves that Vladimir Putin benefits from. So, but you said it, WS. You said, I like how you concealed your name because you know all this stuff's going to be filed and will be put on a list. And here I am with my shiny black people face and my real government name. Okay. Did I mention I'm voting today? Oh, Martha. All right, let me throw some hands of love up for this comment. It's 1963, the March on Washington. We were told to go slow, but we can't go slow anymore we can't go slow anymore. But you can't always get what you want in the marketocracy. Come on. You always count on Martha for some poetry. All right, let's try to land this plane, dock this ship, park this car, chain this bike. Let's use more renewable, low carbon forms of transit. Take off these shoes. Let's do that as we attempt to close out. Okay, I need to bring that back up front to see you and your pretty comments. In the 2020 election, Trump got an estimated 8% of the black vote. Biden got 91. 8%. I remember joking about who are the 8%? I mean, it's Diamond and Silk, that dude Terrence. Who else? Like, who else? I guess the South Carolina Senator, Tim. Why did I just forget his last name? What's Tim's last name? Tim. This is a beautiful live moment. Okay. Well, that's embarrassing. Not for me, for Tim. I literally have to look this up. I'm losing my marbles. Okay, Tim Scott. It just came back to me. Oh my goodness. Woo! You can tell how much of a mark he's left on me. There's a whole other live about. Yes, Tim Scott. I'm going to give credit. Thank you, Renee A. Freeman. Tim Scott. I forgot there's a time delay on the live. So now that I've said it, I'm going to see all the comments trickling in. All right, we'll take that down off the screen. You will all continue to help me. So in 2020, Trump got 8%, Biden got 91. Today, Trump is polling at 16. He's polling at 16% in the black community. The trend line is clear. And to hear some of his boosters sell it, it's got to be the shoes. It ain't the shoes. It ain't the shoes. In case you missed, and nobody here missed it, but I'll just keep reading it. Trump recently debuted a set of $400 gold sneakers called the Never Surrender High Tops at SneakerCon. On the day after, a New York state judge ordered him and his companies to pay nearly $355 million plus about $100 million in interest in a civil fraud trial. So if my math is right, he's going to have to sell about 100 million pair of sneakers to cover that. One TikTok creator, Conscious Lee, called them the January 6s and the Air Fraud 1s. I love that. So every time I see them damn shoes, I'm like, Air Fraud 1s, just great. A few days later, at a rally in South Carolina with Tim, the ever forgettable Scott, Trump claimed that the black people like me because of all of his indictments, which he suggested we could relate to, because we're always being indicted by the government. My mugshot, we've all seen the mugshot, and you know who embraced it more than anybody else? The black population. It's incredible, quote unquote. Super Cheeto Max, Orange Menace, the Trumpster, the Trumpinator, the would-be dictator, said all those things. This comparison is offensive, it's foolish, the conclusion is absurd, it's nonsensical. But in a system that has failed to deliver overall, we can't deny the appeal of the Trump mythos. Or is it mythos? I'm going to pretend I'm Greek. Mythos. He appears successful. He carries the brand of businessman. He mostly evades legal consequences for his transgressions and has been talking up his legal woes as if he is a rebel or political dissident rather than a twice impeached former president who tried and failed to orchestrate a coup. This dude, some nerve. As Pastor McBride noted, there's a certain fascination that black men have with a billionaire. I would add, especially if those men are far from being a billionaire themselves. Now, of course, most of us black dudes, we can't host rallies in hawk sneakers while carrying 91 criminal counts in multiple jurisdictions. Pastor Mike was so funny. He's like, you and Trump have totally different experiences in life. He's joked about anyone who sees themselves in Trump. You wouldn't be flying in a private jet back and forth to Mar-a-Lago with all these indictments. You'd be in jail, bro. While you fight your cases, you would be in jail. And that's the extraordinary thing about Mr. Trump. He's like a magician. He's like a wizard. He casts a spell. And he does it all for himself. But he convinces people he's doing it for them. It's really powerful. It's really potent. It's really frightening, given what he's using it toward. And I encourage folks to look up what some of the plans are. The plans to install a bunch of political appointees throughout all government agencies, the Department of Justice in particular, and to go after his enemies, which would be anyone that he decides is an enemy. They have conflated rule of law with rule of president in their proposed plans. And I'm not just making this up. There's a 890-page document that the Heritage Foundation put together with their plans for a Trump administration. They created their own LinkedIn for like fascist government operators who are down with implementing this. They're going to be so much better at it the next time around. Because he was just fumbling at the switches. He was as surprised as the rest of us that he won. You see, remember that look on his face? It was like when he stared at the sun without glasses. This dude had no idea. No idea. Now he's got ideas, and he's more important, his people around him have got ideas and experience. So one of the things that was in their plan was to have as cause for removal from any government position, anyone who has been through any kind of training labeled diversity, equity, or inclusion. Even if you went unwillingly to the DEI training, they're going to fire your ass. That's cold, man. It's obviously backward and overreach, but I'm thinking about the people who went unwillingly to the training and were like, this DEI is some bullshit. And they getting fired too. So yeah, Project 25. Thank you, Camping Knitter. I'll throw that up on the screen. It'll help with the replays. Look it up. Heritage Foundation Project. They've got a whole freaking set of playbooks for every part of the government. Like, this is what we're going to do with the Interior Department. It's terrifying. It's like the transition playbook toward fascism. Fascism has a transition team, and they're already on the job. We should pull that. That's quotable. So all of that's true. You know, these black dudes, we are not going to live the Trump life. Yet, Trump feeds off of despondency. He lies repeatedly, takes credit for things he didn't do, promises things he can't deliver. As Pastor Mike said, I think black men are looking at the state of their life and feeling like, I'm out here on my own, grasping for straws. And if you were drowning in an ocean and someone comes along and throws you a lifeline, you wouldn't care what's in the boat on the other side because you're in such a state of emergency. End quote. We're still far from the election. And I find it hard to believe that large numbers of black people will vote for Trump instead of voting for a third-party candidate or opting out entirely or just coming around to Biden or whoever happens to be on the ticket if it's not Biden in case some weird stuff happens. But that depends on what Biden, the Democrats, and all of us who believe in the possibility of a better democracy, even as we struggle against the ineffectiveness of the current version, it depends on what we do in this moment. What's required is delicate and complex choreography. Dance moves. which is something that Black people are great at. That was not in the piece. That was for you. On the economic and justice agenda, Democrats must humbly engage with voters who are drifting from Biden, rather than repeating talking points about how great everything is. On the Israel-Hamas war, Israel-Palestine war, we must simultaneously hold that Black solidarity with Palestinians isn't necessarily a rejection of Jewish people, and that Jews' fears of resurgent anti-Semitism and the erasure of Israel are legitimate. As for Trump, I sincerely hope that he is convicted of everything, but I wouldn't count on institutions saving us. We have to save ourselves, and it's going to take a broad, though imperfect, coalition to do it. Again. The end. You have been listening to and watching me read Biden's Black Voter Dilemma, available at puck.news, written by Baratunde Thurston, read by Baratunde Thurston, flubbed and improvised and talked over by Baratunde Thurston. Thanks to viewers like you, but you're more than viewers. You're commenters, you're YouTube associates, you're co-producers, and I could have done this without you. Also, you side camera people over on the IG Live. You're still sticking in there. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool you did that. So let's take a look at any other comments that I may have missed, and I will try to play along with y'all a little bit more, take a little sip of water. But we have been, how long have we been at this? I should be able to have a quick answer. Just over an hour 20 minutes. So that took an hour and 20 minutes to get through. That's like a whole commute across LA County, depending on the time of day and the day of the week. Yeah, let me throw this briefly back up. So this is the piece, and it kind of, look at my little puck face there. That's pretty cool, right? So these words existed. Just want to show you. I really wrote all this stuff, and I appreciate you showing up for me breaking the paywall. That was a fun experiment. And now we're going to hang out for a little longer, just a few minutes, while I catch my breath and catch up with you. Oh, thank you, B. Dodgson. Love emoji combo like that. Appreciate that. Linda Evans, thank you. Let's help heal and get the vote out. Agreed. And let's think really broadly about what that voting might look like. I spent most of my time on this here ballot focused on the local, especially obviously it's a primary. So that's where the battle really happens. But there's some interesting things happening at the bottom of the ballot. So if you haven't and can, go ahead, get your vote on. Do it. Unless it's after the fact. I don't want you, don't commit voter fraud. Okay, that's not a thing that I want you to suddenly make a thing. But if you can, do, and more, and more. And P. Leon, thank you. You are so welcome. I clap for you for sticking around. Renee, thank you. Saving me with Tim Scottness. You remembered so I don't have to. Kristen, good to see you again. Hello. Thank you. This is a good question. Tools for Thought Rocks. What's your vision for how to citizen? Based on your learning, what's the one action you'd most like everyone to do if you could change behavior? Just one aspect of everyday life. If I get one thing, everybody needs to be hydrated. I think a good 38.5% of our woes in this country is due to dehydration. Folks think soda's hydrating, think coffee's hydrating. They're not. They're literally dehydrating. And we got to bring people back around to water, but not just water with minerals. I'm saying water with minerals means real water from a real place, like an aquifer, like a well, like, not all the treated and stripped stuff. And that means we are in relationship. We're in relationship with our natural world. We're in relationship with each other. And so that is an unexpected segue into my answer to your question, which is, if there's one thing, it is that we try to see ourselves as in relation to each other, not always in opposition, not in transaction with. That's what marketocracy will do. Thank you, Martha, for that term from earlier. And, we have been convinced that all of our needs get met either by someone else and we don't have to do anything, or by consumption, that we pay for it. There's a product or a service that'll do it for us, as opposed to us doing some things together and being in relation with our food, with our neighbors, with each other. And if we have more of an established set of relationships, then some of the silos we have between us, they crumble a little bit. And we find ways to work across some of those differences, and we don't get so distant that we start imagining things about each other as the other, instead of seeing ourselves in one another. Did I just become Jesse Jackson? Thank you for the question. Appreciate you. And with that, I'm going to wind it down. I want to thank my folks on the side screen over here on IG Live. Let me just, I want to introduce you to each other. IG people meet YouTube, YouTube meet IG. See, this is the relationship. I'm trying to bring us all together. Look at us. We're just in an infinite hall of mirrors. Me and you, which is also me in you in your feed, but you're in my feed. You see what I mean? We got to do more of that. More of that transcendent quantum goodness. So thank you for showing up. I know it was weird, but it didn't cost me anything to keep the stream open. So I hope we'll do this again in the not too distant future. And in the meantime, I'm going to say end to the verticals, and you get the last word. This has been fun. I was also a test. It's a software test. It was a duration and endurance test. It was a water test. It was an internet test. It's a democracy test. It is a citizening test. And we are always in it, and we're always being tested. We're also always administering the test. I'm going to close by referencing and turning you to Adrienne Marie Brown, who did a recent video on the vertical world, and I just shunned them. Live video ended. I can still talk about them. And, she was referencing this moment and how Biden has shown up or not. And she said something that really stuck. She said, it's not our job to make him electable. It's his job. It's his job to be electable. And people are using these primary voting moments to express themselves and demand more and demand better. And that's how this is supposed to work. And there's so much more work that we can be doing, in relationship with each other, beyond just the ballot. Though if you have that ballot, use it before we lose it. Oh, I ended on a weird threat. I think I threatened you in the end. Anyway, thank you. I'm going to drop these ballots off. Speaking of voting and ballots, I always find it hard. I think I don't like leaving parties. I like to be like the last one to leave, but that's really awkward. If I just tell you to drop the stream, don't do that. I will just elegantly end it. If I can find the end it button. Y'all have been so patient with me. What? Oh, it's because, well, that's fun. My stream software kind of froze. And so I'm stuck. I'm stuck in the stream. Help! I'm stuck in the stream. How do I get out? I'm actually kind of serious. That's kind of nuts. Good night. Yeah, I see everybody signing off, but I'm not going anywhere apparently. So it's probably a keyboard command. What if I hit the space bar? All right, this is started to freak me out. The overlay does come back up, but nothing else does. Live is always an adventure. Yeah, it is. You helped me with that test a couple weeks ago. Thank you, Richard. Well, I guess I could just like quit the app. I always have that right. You know what? I'm going to end it on the YouTube side because I don't want it to like corrupt things. And oh, Marcus, you get the last one. I think you were one of my first comments. Thank you. Thank you for engaging. And I'll see you next time. End stream. Yeah, the internet doesn't want you to leave.